Hello, hello, hello. How we doing? Woo! Good morning, everyone. My name is Roberto Escalante. I have the privilege of working here at Hope at our Office of Admissions. You're not here to see me speak, but we'll get to that. I just got some opening remarks. One, to welcome you, to give you some reminders. Like I said, I work at our Office of Admissions, and that's, I believe, one of the best jobs on campus. If you talk to anyone here, there we go. If you talk to any Hope employee, they'll probably say they have the best job, but I think I do. I get to recruit students to come to this beautiful place. In fact, if you're a student, if you're a Hope student, make some noise. We got any? There we go. I love it. My job is kind of easy, though. I'm not going to lie, because we have an amazing campus, but more importantly, because we have amazing people that work here at Hope. Our faculty and staff, from the professors in the classrooms to the individual serving you your food at Phelps Dining Hall. We have amazing people that work here. So if you're a Hope faculty or staff member, make some noise. Love it. Love it. Even more so, we are nestled in a beautiful community in Holland, Michigan, and we really have a great relationship with the community, and they love us, we love them. So if you're not from Hope, but you're from the Holland community, make some noise. Anyone? A couple people? Love it. Love it, love it. So some quick reminders before we get kicked off. This is a live event, so this is being live streamed globally. So two things. One, no flash photography. I haven't taken a photo with flash in many years, but in case your phone does do flash, make sure that's off, and make sure your phones are silenced. Very quickly too, you have a QR code that you have in your folder. We can't promise we'll get to the Q&A, but if we do, you submit your questions via the QR code. You'll get sent to a questionnaire page. You can send your question there, and hopefully we can get to it. What else? Let's bring the energy. Let's bring the hype. This is a live event, so the more you are involved, the better it will be for everyone. So welcome once again, and enjoy. Cheers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you today to this morning's Catalyst conversation, Pushing the Boundaries of Innovation in Higher Education. My name's Jennifer Fellinger. I'm the Vice President for Student Formation and Co-Curricular Programming here at Hope College. And whether you're joining us in person or online, I and all of my colleagues here at Hope are so delighted to welcome you to this event. And thank you, really thank you for being here today. We're so excited to host the Catalyst Summit, and we feel really honored and grateful that you've chosen to spend your time with us today. There is a word that's sometimes used to describe the pace of change in higher education: glacial. And it's true, things within a campus community, they move slowly, very slowly. And we are, after all, built on long-standing paradigms and traditions, some of which go back to medieval times and even before that. And to be sure, there's something really special about being part of a shared tradition of educating and inspiring students. As faculty, staff, and administrators, we're here because we love engaging with students and engaging students' hearts and minds, and we love sparking within them the appetite and the ability to be bold and creative critical thinkers and critical leaders. And yet, as dedicated as we are to equipping our students to change the world, we often find ourselves held back from transforming our own world of higher education. So today we're here to talk about how we break those confines and catalyze innovation. At Hope, we've been talking a lot about gratitude and giving and generosity. And we're mindful of how we can be gifts to one another. So in this session, we have the gift of 3 extraordinary panelists whose generosity of time, knowledge, expertise, talent brought us together here today. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read their biographies, but I hope you'll take a moment to look at the program online or in print to read the bios. But I'll just quickly say a few words. So we'll be welcoming Matthew Scogin, who's the president of Hope College. President Scogin came to Hope in 2019 with a vision for an ambitious goal that would be known as Hope Forward. And Hope Forward is a unique model of fully funding college education based on pillars of access, community, and generosity. We'll also have on screen Dr. Michael Crow, president of Arizona State University. Dr. Crow has served as president since 2002, and his forward-thinking leadership during that time has made Arizona State University synonymous with groundbreaking innovation in higher education. And finally, we'll be welcoming Malcolm Gladwell. Mr. Gladwell is a journalist, podcaster, the author of 7 New York Times bestsellers, and kind of a Renaissance man, really. If you've read any of Mr. Gladwell's writings, chances are really good that in doing so, you've developed a brand new lens through which you view the world around you. So won't you please join me in a round of applause for Malcolm Gladwell, who will be our host and moderator this morning.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Malcolm Gladwell, and I am here to host what I'm sure will be a fascinating conversation about innovation in higher education, featuring your very own President Matt Scogin. Matt, will you come out and join us? And then we're going to be joined. Come on out. I'm going to be joined remotely by Michael Crow. There he is. Hey. And thank you, Michael, for sit here, for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I wanted to have this conversation for really, really selfish reasons, because I wanted to answer a question that I've had, a puzzle that I've been thinking about for many, many, many years, which is, why is there not more innovation in higher ed? Last night I went for a walk down the 8th Street, which is the central commercial thoroughfare of Holland, Michigan, where Hope is. And I saw fancy restaurants, gastropubs, fast food restaurants, every different kind of restaurant in the span of 4 blocks. There is more innovation in 4 blocks of 8th Street than there is in American higher education. And with me, you are the, forgive me if you are the OG of higher ed innovation in America. And Matt is the YG. So we got 2 people here who I think could help us answer this question. And Michael, let's start with you.
Okay.
Before we dig into your experience in transforming Arizona State, I want to talk more generally about just that general question. What's your first response to why is this sector, why are you unusual?
I think the weird thing, Malcolm, about higher education is its intensive focus on selfish ego of the individual. And what I mean by that is faculty, viewing the world only sometimes in the smallest consideration or in the smallest design, and then the universities themselves ending up, in the colleges, not all of them, but most of them, ending up being faculty-centric. And so what we have is an ancient medieval culture built around the individual, which then hasn't allowed us to then take on the collective questions about how to innovate in the community, either in a liberal arts college, a religious college, a public university, a private university. So the barrier is a design barrier, and it takes design changes to be able to move through it. So I think we're designed for the past for the most part. We're designed for the few. We're designed for the selfishly focused. And I don't mean to be harsh by that. I mean, it's just a design thing.
Yeah. Is there any sector of the American economy or the Western economy that resembles higher ed in this respect?
Well, some elements of healthcare, with the role of the doctor as the philosopher king or queen of the sector, a little bit. Innovation is slower in the design of healthcare and the change of healthcare because it's still built around the superhero doctor in the way that academia is built around the superhero faculty member. So there are a few areas that are slow to innovate. Now, that doesn't mean that coming out of these institutions aren't tremendous individual innovations in science or technology or medicine, but the institutions themselves. So let's just look at healthcare. We spend twice as much in healthcare as any other country in the world, and we don't even rank in the top 25 in terms of outcomes. And so that's not a system that's working very well in spite of all of its individual achievements.
Mm-hmm. Matt, I called you Matthew. Should I call you? Does anyone call you Matthew?
My mom used to call me Matthew. She was the only one. So you'll rank right up there with my mom. So that puts you in
when we chatted yesterday, we spent some time talking about your mom.
We did.
Debbie.
Exactly. Good
Yes.
memory. Yeah.
I was trying to figure out whether Matt's desire to blow things up in higher ed was the result of his father or his mother's influence.
I think we determined it's my mom's fault.
We think it's his mom. We think Debbie is the one that's. But I'm curious, when you come along a couple of years ago and say, I'd like to try something as radical at Hope College as the kinds of things that Michael Crow's been doing at ASU. Very different, but equally, I think, radical. Were you worried or anxious when you look? I mean, the track record of innovators in this space it's that, and basically, as they say in baseball, 6 days of rain. Did that give you pause?
No. I mean, in some ways, I was so naive when I stepped into this because I was totally new to higher education. So I was kind of climbing the learning curve of higher ed at the same time when we were trying to cast a vision for pretty dramatic change. So I kind of just stumbled into it, I think, pretty naively. I think the thing that Michael and I have in common, so we have a couple of things in common. We both set out to really solve the puzzle of access. And when I started this job, and it's still the case, I would go to these like college president meetings. And the college presidents, especially the college presidents in the Midwest, the one thing they were all talking about is the demographic cliff. The demographics of the Midwest are going down. How is this going to impact our college? And I just felt like they're talking about the wrong problem because the population of the world is growing. So if you're solving for the demographic cliff, you're by definition just trying to keep your institution afloat. Whereas if you redefine the problem around access, then the problem suddenly becomes a different thing to solve. Because if the population of the world is growing, then it's a matter of how do we get students around the world to have access to the kind of education we provide. So we both set out to solve that problem of access, and we've taken different routes. And I think it's very interesting. You know, we've set out to solve it through Hope Forward. They've set out to solve it through technology and different tools. And first of all, I wish there should be 100 different flavors of solving access. There should be 100 different flavors in higher ed of trying to solve that problem. I think the other thing that Michael and I have in common is that we did this job in the middle of our career, as opposed to at the end of our career, which is the typical path for a college president. Usually a college president does this job at the very end of their career. The average age of a college president in the United States is 62, and the average years of service is 6 years. And so if you do this job at the end of your career, and you only have 6 years to do it, you don't have time. You don't have time to set a vision, see the change, and then see the institution through it. Michael started when he was in his mid to early 40s and has done the job for 21 years and has set a vision, saw the institution through it, and is now leading on the other side. And I was 39 when the board hired me. So I think there's something to be said for that. I think there's something to be said for having a leader. The average age of a CEO, by the way, is 54. And so to the extent, I just think there might be something to that. There might be something to maybe doing this in the middle of your career as opposed to at the end of your career.
Yeah. Did you, Michael, when you started at Arizona State, you'd come from Columbia.
Right.
So you'd come from just about the most traditional American university. Did you, what were the kinds of obstacles that you faced in the beginning at Arizona State? Were there things you had to overcome to sort of set about on this path of change?
Yeah, the most important thing was convincing people that they could leave the safety of the terribly constraining system that they were in and be empowered. So we work to empower the faculty to be designers of new intellectual trajectories. We work to empower the entire community around the notion of inclusiveness. We have 46,000 undergraduates who are Pell eligible attending the university, and back then we had less than a quarter of that number. And so it was really the obstacle was getting people to believe that change was possible. The obstacle was empowerment of people trapped in unbelievable academic bureaucracies, wasting their mental neurons on all kinds of meaningless discussions. And so it was really getting people to be convinced that we could be something and do something different, because there was a lot of doubt as to whether or not that was possible.
Mm-hmm. And I want both of you to respond to this. This was something that Matt and I were talking about yesterday, but I think it's important to clarify that a university president is not a CEO. You can't walk in and just say, I want this, and it gets done the next day. It's a very different structure, right? There is some laughter in the room at this. And I want both of you to talk about, what is that? So you're both innovators working in a situation where you don't have the kind of authority that the general of an army has or the CEO of a company has. So how does that complicate the task of radical innovation? Why don't you start, Michael, then we'll go to Matt.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. It's really a role for intellectual and cultural leadership as opposed to command and control leadership. The nature of knowledge creation and free speech and religious education, whatever it happens to be, command and control doesn't work in those modalities. And so it requires a different kind of leadership. Nonetheless, leadership, creating an environment, creating a culture, altering the culture, but doing it through idea generation and design empowerment. So we take a very, very different approach. And it turns out, 21 years into this, that like Matt was saying, if you're able to stick with it, it works. It's just that most people aren't able to stick with it. They get worn out, they retire, they get knocked off. Something happens to them along the way. So it's really a completely different, and in my mind, a much more interesting leadership environment. So it's leadership by idea, and leadership by thought, and leadership by design empowerment, and not, by the way, I'll just add, leadership by administration. So people often refer to academic leadership as administrators. Well, that's a pejorative term. We're not administrators. We have nothing to administer. Our job is to drive the knowledge creation, knowledge transfer, knowledge synthesis process to a higher and higher level for our species, and to do that in a way which has more people involved than have ever been involved in that process before. So yes, it's thankfully a different kind of leadership. Yes.
Was there any point along the way where you came close to giving up?
No, that's not. You can talk about my parents, and what you'd find out is that that's not going to happen with me. So.
Good. Reassuring answer. Matt.
I think my observation is you're right in that colleges and universities are set up intentionally with a shared governance structure, and the intent is good. The intent is much like government, that these institutions ought to be run with a lot of checks and balances, and that means it's hard for any one person, for any one department to affect a lot of change. In order to get things done, you have to align a lot of people, a lot of different stakeholders in the same direction. I spent time in government and then in the private sector before this job, and my time in government prepared me way better for this job than my time in the private sector, because government is set up the same way, lots of checks and balances. I think I compare my job, it's definitely not a CEO job, neither is it an academic job. It's almost, I think the best comparison for my job is that it feels oftentimes like I'm the mayor of a small town. And if you remember back to your 8th grade civics class, if you had such a thing, did you have that in Canada?
No, we don't have any issues with civics in Canada. We don't. Everything works so well. There's no reason to.
That's right. You don't need to. Yeah, that's right.
Like,
well, we have a different situation in the U.S. So in my 8th grade civics class, I learned that there's two kinds of city government. There's a strong mayor, weak council, and there's a strong council, weak mayor. And I feel like my title is president, but in many ways I'm more like a weak mayor. I don't actually have a lot of authority on my own. For me to get anything done, I have to align a lot of people in the same direction. And that's a very tedious task. But if you can pull it off, in the end it means that the change will be more sustainable, because you've done it by aligning a lot of people in the same direction. So I think it's perhaps slower moving and more tedious to do it, but if you can do it, I think it's the change in the end is higher impact.
Next question I wanted to ask the two of you was about context, or not, about replicability rather. The reason I'm as interested in what the two of you are doing as I am is that I would like lots of other people to try it. But when I look at the two of you, I was talking about this with Matt yesterday, there's lots of reasons to think that hope might be unusual. It's got strong community support, a religious tradition which allows you to explore all kinds of things you wouldn't normally explore. It's a wealthy community, and in the same case with you, my question is Arizona And then is it an unusual place that allowed this to happen, or could I have plunked you down anywhere? And what if you'd stayed at Columbia? Could you have pulled off a similar kind of transformation at Columbia?
Yeah, the answer at Columbia would be no, because there's already certainty that their model is perfected. But while I was there for the 12 years that I was there, I did design the Earth Institute at Columbia, which was one of the more significant new things of the 20th century out of Columbia. So it was possible to move the institution. The notion about Arizona is unusual because new ideas are welcome, and it's just flooding in people from all kinds of places, and you can design new kinds of institutions. But let me say that that's only one factor in this. What people have to want is they have to understand that our country, 340 million people, give or take, is not as prepared for the future as we have been in the past prepared for the future. What I mean by that is half the people that go to college don't finish in the United States. The vast majority of people with debt from college have no degree, which makes a very different economic model. We have a system which has run its course, and so I can see the things that Matt's doing at Hope. That are, with the Hope Forward program and the other things that are going on there. What's needed is more and more and more waves of innovation. So we formed, Malcolm, a University Innovation Alliance that I am the chairman of and created about 7 or 8 years ago, that has 15 universities as members, and we're all innovating together, something that's highly, highly unusual all across the entire country. We've increased the number of Pell-eligible graduates beyond our normal pathway by more than 100,000 in just 5 years. The number of graduates from minority communities by doubling those numbers. I mean, these are really tremendous things. So the answer is there's hunger for innovation. It's just a very difficult sector to innovate in, and it's not the uniqueness of Arizona that has allowed us to move forward. It's perhaps the unusualness of Arizona that allows us to move forward and be given time to succeed.
Mm-hmm. But what's another example? I mean, this is a serious question, though. I can see your point about Columbia. They have already succeeded in the category that they wish to compete in.
Right.
So they have no motivation to blow it up and start over.
Right.
But give me another example of a kind of university where the kind of path you want to go on would have been difficult, for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, it would have been difficult at any of the public universities in California. And so it would have been very difficult at the State University of New York. I mean, it would have been difficult and it is difficult at many universities because they're managed on a different trajectory. There are some, however, that are making big changes. Purdue University under President Mitch Daniels made significant changes. They built a thing called Purdue Global to try to reach into every household. University of Central Florida in Orlando, which is almost 70,000 students, is highly innovative and adapting and changing. Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond is attempting significant innovations and transformations. So there's a lot going on. So there's some places where this is taking hold and other places where there's significant resistance.
Yeah. Matt, I want to dig down on this a little deeper and talk about the board. Mm. So,
some of them are here.
Some of them are probably here. I never even thought about boards, and then I got on a board, and someone tricked me into joining it, and I was like, oh my goodness, it really matters.
It does.
It really matters. So, Michael was talking about the kind of broader context of change in Arizona, but talk specifically, what did you need, what kind of board did you have to make what you're doing at Hope possible? And tell me about that, the role they played in this.
I mean, the first thing I would note is that the board had the guts to hire me, and the board, the Board of Hope is not going to hire, a young non-academic. Because there's water in here. Yeah. the board's not going to hire a young non-academic and then expect me to come in and like do the status quo. So I think by definition, the fact that the board hired me, they were looking for change. So it was a very strong premise from which to lead and affect change. But I do think, if the question on the table, if one of the questions on the table is why isn't there more innovation coming out of college presidencies, I think you're right, Malcolm, that you have to look beyond the president to the board. Because I think you need appetite for a change from the board, and the board really, in many ways, has to be the group that's driving it. And I think so many boards of colleges and universities get sucked into the rankings game, and the rankings game is all built around trying to build mini Ivy Leagues, and that will, by definition, limit your ability to really think out of the box. And the other thing that's characteristic of many boards is a very high concentration of alumni, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, and ours too has a high concentration of alumni, but oftentimes alumni will go into a board conversation and their mentality is trying to preserve the institution the way it was when I was here. And you're going to maybe limit yourself in terms of your ability to think around corners and look to the future if your board mentality is trying to preserve something from the past.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, can you point to something what's the reason why? I mean, we discussed this yesterday. Like if I'm an outsider and I'm a Martian looking down on Holland, Michigan, I would say it's the upper Midwest, it's a conservative part of the country, it's the Rust Belt, blah, blah, blah. It's not where revolutions happen. In our popular mythology, revolutions happen in Silicon Valley, right?
Right.
But no, the revolution happened here.
I think so. I think I appreciate that. I think we are starting a revolution. Yeah, I think it's, I would say we're starting a revolution, but it's coming from a very strong sense of who we are. And you mentioned that. I think that is a distinctive of Hope. It's our name, it's our Christian mission, and the extent to which there is something that we want to preserve, it's precisely that. It's who we are, our identity and our mission. And the board is, above all things, the guardian of our mission. And I think the ability to ground ourselves in who we are and ground ourselves in our mission and then say, from that premise, let's go after it. And, I've said this a million times, but who better than a place called Hope to run toward things that to the world look hopeless? And so I think I had this very strong premise from the board of let's lean into who we are. And at the end of the day, we are an institution that embodies that sentiment, that embodies hope. And the world right now is so quick to turn to cynicism and despair. And of all the things we've gone through over the last few years, I think my take is there's the headline problems, the pandemic and racial injustice and all the things we've gone through over the last few years. I think there's a deeper problem underneath those problems, which is a sense of cynicism and despair when it comes to those problems, like a sense in which our problems can't be solved. And in higher ed, there's a very troubling sense, I find it to be a troubling sense, this sense in which, actually cynicism is somehow the higher intellectual stance, that, you have, somehow you're the most intellectual stance is one of cynicism and one of despair. And I think what we're saying is, no, that's not the case. We can be an academic, intellectual institution and at the same time a community that believes problems are solvable, and we, by definition, are then going to run toward things like access to education.
Mm-hmm. Michael, can you talk about your peers, other college presidents, and how they have looked at what you're doing at ASU over the years? So take me back to the beginning, when the first kind of rumblings start coming out of ASU, that you're shaking things up. When you go and you go to the Association of American University, whatever, I don't know what it's called, but, or when you go and you're playing golf with, do you play golf? You don't have time for golf.
No golf. I write books instead of playing golf.
Do you play golf, Malcolm?
I don't. I run on golf courses.
You have a podcast about that.
I have, yes. I don't. But I'm just curious. Talk about how was what you were doing received by your peer community?
Well, what was funny, there's lots of groups out there. We're a part of a thing called the Pac-12 conference with UCLA and UC Berkeley and Stanford and Washington and other schools like that. And so, in the public university circles, the answer was, good luck. What you're trying to do is impossible. The easiest path forward for you to take a school like ASU, which used to have a reputation of the world's largest party school, and turn it into, a functioning research university, is to cut out the bottom half of your freshman class. That is, take out, we have half our freshman class of 16,000 is A students coming from high school, sort of like the Hope students. Half are B students, which are fully qualified to go to universities, but public universities research universities anyway, have stopped admitting them. So I was told by a number of people the way to move forward is to cut out the bottom of your freshman class, upping your rankings as a function of doing that, and build a medical school. And I said, well, here's two things that won't happen we won't do either of those. Because we're not going to build the university based on exclusion. We're going to build the university on inclusion. So there was huge skepticism. Then we began to become successful, and then there was skepticism about whether or not it was true. So we grew engineering from 6,000 underperforming engineering students to 22,000 on campus this year, 8,000 online. So we have 30,000 engineering students. So then people are, well, how can this be possible? Well, because we have robots teaching calculus. We've got many more people that can do engineering that couldn't do it before. So then there's skepticism. And we've sort of moved past that now to the notion of, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe if you innovate organizationally and you innovate technologically, we have a different mission than Hope. We have the same purpose, but we have a different pathway. Maybe this is working. So skepticism would be the principal result, the principal thought at the beginning, and I think followed then by doubt, then followed by, we get labeled sort of as a pink unicorn. So somehow they're just oddballs sitting out there in the desert, doing these things that are completely different. And now we've gone a little bit past that. So now we're looking at, we have about 250 colleges and universities that we're working with through our University Design Institute right now, working at design levels to enhance design outcomes. And so we've gone to design opportunities and partnership opportunities from significant doubt.
Give me a sense of the timeline of that. How long does it take to get out of doubt? So you start with skepticism and then doubt. So how many years?
Well, probably on campus, it was at least 3 or 4 years to move out of doubt. And then beyond the campus, probably 6 or 7, even 8 more years to move out of doubt, and then to move into practice, and then now to move in the last 4 or 5 years, significant focus on the model. So it takes a while.
So you're saying to get to the point where what you're doing has true national momentum, we're talking 15 years.
Yes, and that was my guess when I came. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. That was your guess when you came.
Yeah, I told my wife, Sybil Francis is her name. She runs the Center for the Future of Arizona here, which looks at where we agree and what common purposes we have and what shared public values we have. So we're sort of on a mission together here, more than sort of. I just said this is it. This is the duration. This is the long haul. This is going to take decades to help make this happen. Because I knew from my work at Columbia and my work in other institutions of higher education, as Matt is learning, the clock speed is different. This watch I have here, which was given to me, it's a Seiko, was given to me by my kids like 25 years ago. It tells time according to the orbit of the Earth, not according to academic time, because each second hand would be a semester. and so we just can't operate on that time frame. So I knew it was going to take a long time.
Matt, what is your reaction to that? It's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he just said 15 years. We're 19 months into our journey here. So, yeah, I guess I better get a new watch and recalibrate.
But this is, of all the things that have been said so far, to my mind, this is one of the most important, which is that our expectations as a culture for how long it takes to change things are way off, and we give up too soon.
Yes.
Right? How many turnarounds are supposed to happen, transformations are supposed to happen? I had a conversation once with a venture capitalist, and I said, where do you invest? He goes, I invest in alternate energy. And I said, oh, how long do you wait to get your money out? He goes, 3 years.
Yeah.
This is nonsense.
Yeah, but that guy doesn't work in a world. We have functioning institutions that we compete against that have been in continuous operation for 1,000 years. And in England and in Europe, and so there's nothing like this. I mean, Harvard's almost 400 years old in continuous operation. The University of South Carolina has started right at the end of the American Revolution. Nothing exists in our society that's a functioning organization outside of religious organizations for that kind of time frame.
Yeah. So one of your tasks, Matt, as someone who's at the beginning of this, is to communicate that timeline to your stakeholders.
Yeah, and as a runner, like to set ourselves up for, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and we got to gear up for a long journey. And I think
It's even beyond a marathon. It's one of those ultra things across the
They're always in Arizona, by the way, so they're always across the Sonora Desert. Or
It's a 50K or 100K trek.
Okay, so it's getting worse.
But are we, if I'm going to be devil's advocate for a moment, I would say, that notion of waiting 15 years for a payoff is so antithetical to the way we think as a society right now that I really worry that you guys are one-offs.
Yeah. Well, we just implemented a technology for learning biology as an undergraduate during COVID that just gave us a 30% improvement in the learning outcomes of people that take this particular virtual reality lab in biology courses. And so what we're finding is that we think that technology is going to have a powerful acceleration function in innovation, more than it's ever had before, as people see these kinds of learning outcome changes. And so I think things are going to accelerate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about briefly about my favorite topic, the U.S. News rankings, which explicitly do not reward the kinds of things that the two of you are talking about. It looks like the U.S. News kind of monopoly in our thinking is starting to crack. But I'm curious about how do you, the quickest way to get others to follow what you're doing is to have some kind of external recognition for the kinds of goals that you're pursuing, right? Like, nobody gives you, right now there are no prizes for access. How do we get to a situation where the rest of the culture rewards people such as yourself for pursuing non-traditional goals in higher ed?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's the start of a movement. You see some institutions that are saying we're going to drop out of the rankings. I think for that to really be effective, you need a collective effort. You need like a big group of institutions to say we're just going to collectively drop out. I think the way we ought to really measure success of institutions is by, like, we use the word transformation here. Like, what are students like when they come in, and what are they like when they leave? What are they learning? How do we assess what students are actually learning? How do we assess our ability to move students from, say, the bottom 20% to the top 20%? I think that's how we ought to move as a society from a rankings, the rankings that's looking primarily at what students, what colleges are taking as an input, how test scores and GPA and what students are like as they come, and actually look at what the outcome is. What are students like as they leave? And I think that's how we're trying to orient things. I think I don't know. I think it's going to take a movement. I mean, if you look at, the ranking stuff better than I do, but I think the ranking started in the early 80s, 1983, something like that. And the top 4 schools, the first year of the rankings, were Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. And 40 years later, maybe the order has changed a little bit, but it's basically the same top 4. And if you look at the top businesses in 1983, like, a lot of them are not even around anymore. And I think part of higher ed's challenge is, and Michael referenced this, institutions that have been around for 400 years or 1,000 years, it's a very, very sticky industry. And the fear of failure is the fear of real failure, like institutions actually going out of business, is not very real in higher education. Like Clay Christensen at Harvard a few years ago put out this study saying he thinks half of colleges are going to go out of business over the next few years. And the immediate reaction is like, well, what's his methodology? Like they pick apart the research as opposed to actually thinking about what would happen if half of our institutions went out of business. And I think it's sticky at the top, obviously the elite schools, but it's also sticky at the bottom, because I think what we see is a lot of schools that are really, really struggling and probably should go out of business, but they have a handful of generous alumni who are donors that keep it on life support for a long, long time. And so there's not the same sense of failure in higher ed that there certainly is in the private. Like, nobody would put out a study saying 50% of businesses are going to go out of business over the next few years. Like, it's just very real. Like, you either are a successful business or you're not. And in higher ed, it's a totally different dynamic, and it's very, very sticky, and that works both to our advantage, but it also can have some negative implications.
Michael?
Yeah, I think what I would add to this discussion at this point is, we have a strange psychology. It's almost like the American Revolution never ended, and George III himself wrote the U.S. News and World Report ranking criteria, which are built on status as an outcome, right, and status as an input. And so we end up in the very bottom of the first tier of the national universities, so we're whatever, because we admit a large percentage of who apply to the institution, because we have our admission standards at what we think is the actual qualification requirement. This is what we think is required to do university level work, and then we admit you. So those requirements are the same as the University of Michigan from 1950. Or the University of California at Berkeley from 1950. Now, the way that then that system has become corrupted is that it believes then that exclusion is the coin of the realm, when in fact it turns out that I used to be a trustee of Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine, an elite four-year New England college, which had only 400 or so students admitted in the freshman class. And so those 400 students are the means by which that entire institution is quote unquote ranked. So we have an honors college, it's an honors college. We have an honors college at ASU that has 8,200 undergraduates in the honors college. Let me guarantee you that the top 400 of our freshman class in the honors college of 2,000 is vastly more academically competitive than the entire Bowdoin College class. But the ranking system is built on exclusion down to the smallest number. So what we have is a lack of creativity in defining the institutions that we have. So we should have all these institutions. So Hope College should be compared against a handful of other very successful, selective Christian colleges and universities, period. And Harvard College as a part of Harvard University should be ranked against Bowdoin College and the Honors College at the University of Alabama and the Honors College at the University of Illinois and so forth. And that doesn't happen because we're still experiencing an incomplete, undone revolution. Status and family rank is still a mechanism by which you gain status in higher education. And that is highly, highly unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I yesterday when I was chatting with Matt, we alluded to at the beginning, we were talking about why he is the way he is, and he talked about his mother. I'm really curious to know a little bit more about why you are the way you are. Can you talk a little bit about your kind of family background and the path you took to your present position as a way of shedding light on that? Like how?
Yeah. So I grew up in a working class family. My parents were teenagers that ran away when my dad joined the Navy from the Midwest to California, where I was born. We moved constantly, 21 times before I went to college, 17 different schools, lots of disruption. My mother died with 4 children at age 28. Our family was highly disrupted as a function of that. But along the way, in spite of living in sort of what we call working poor, working class kind of family background, no one had ever been to college. I have, in my family, I have siblings that didn't graduate from high school. Along the way, I found that even though we were not well off, there were people that were worse off than us. And I encountered this during my Eagle Scout project in 1968. It was just a profound thing for me, where the same day that we delivered this food to a family in rural southern Maryland for 1 year, an African-American family living in a dirt-floored tar paper shack with no running water, I went home that night and watched Apollo 8 circle the moon, send back color pictures of astronauts. And it just was this profound thing for me. And I just said that this is like unbelievably unfair. And so I decided to really, literally, by the time I went to college, I was intent on, this will sound funny and you'll laugh, particularly you, Malcolm. You'll laugh. I wanted to find a way where the kind of world that existed in some of the science fiction stuff that I read, the non-dystopian stuff like Star Trek and stuff like that, more utopian than dystopian, was going to be possible. And I came to the conclusion that the only way that could happen is if you could design knowledge organizations to help impact everyone. And that's what I started doing in my freshman year of college. I got into a bunch of schools, Air Force Academy, a bunch of schools, MIT. I went to Iowa State to throw the javelin. Had a fantastic experience there, and then just became obsessed with how do you design the actual creative knowledge-producing organizations that can help produce the kinds of social outcomes that we really want.
Mm-hmm. By the way, there is no athletic activity that is more perfectly analogous and symbolic of the life that you've embarked on than throwing the javelin. I mean, you can't, Michael, we can't make this up. You're like, you're
Yes.
literally flinging spears.
Yes. I loved throwing the javelin. It was fun.
Oh, it's pretty clear that you still do. Matt, tell us a little bit about where you come from and how that shapes what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'm a kid from West Michigan. I grew up with, I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. I grew up in a pretty modest middle-class family. Both my parents went not just to college, but also to grad school. So I grew up surrounded with a very deep appreciation for education and the power of a great education. My dad was a PhD chemist. He worked at a pharmaceutical company in Kalamazoo, Michigan for his whole career. Basically had the same job his whole life. And my mom had a master's degree and spent most of her time as raising her 4 kids, but her job outside of that was a middle school science teacher. And we alluded to this. My dad, in a beautiful way, my dad was the smartest person I've ever met by far, but he had no ambition, and it frustrated me. But looking back, there's something beautiful about that. He was content to do the same job his whole life. My mom had a ton of ambition, and she channeled it into me and into her kids. And she just gave me, she kept saying, if you don't like the world, you better go out there and change it. And it just gave me this deep sense of I can do this. And I think I got a great education at Hope, and then Hope opened up all kinds of doors for me. And 4 years ago, the board invites me to come back, and it's been amazing.
Mm-hmm. I want to play a little game with the two of you. It's my magic wand game, which I always like to ask people. But if I gave you a magic wand and I allowed you to change one thing in your current job that you think would make it easier to accomplish what you want to accomplish, what would that be? Michael, why don't you start? What's your?
Yeah, I don't know. I have lots of magic wands here because we built them, but and they work. But if you gave me another one,
I'll give you another one.
I think that what would be very powerful would be for us to find ways to express to both our students and our faculty and our communities really the power of what's going on here. I am unbelievably positive about the future. It is unbelievable, the kids that we have here, what they're doing, what they can do. A team of ASU students won the Global Masking X Prize during the pandemic. It's unbelievable. They won the prize, the X Prize. The oldest person on it was 20. Came with $500,000, the whole thing. And so if I had a magic wand, the magic wand would be to get people to understand the importance of colleges and universities to securing the future for all of us, and sort of moving past some of this supercilious political debate that's going on around what's going on at these schools. What's going on at these schools is we're producing unbelievable human beings for the future, and they are very, very empowered to do great things. So that's the magic wand that I wish I had.
Matt, what's your?
You could answer this for us. We're trying to raise a lot of money. We're trying to raise. If I had a magic wand, I would poof, and we would have $1 billion, and then we could do Hope Forward forever.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to flip the switch. We've got a pilot group of 60-ish students that are helping us pilot this vision, and we're learning a lot. And everything so far is just breaking to the high side. And so we're on this endeavor to raise some money so that we can flip the switch and do this for our whole campus community forever. And yeah, that's the magic wand. And we're looking for it. It's not magic. The money's out there. So we're just it may take 15 years or more, but we're gonna go find it.
Yeah. I want to shift a little bit and talk about students. And I'm curious, start with you, Michael. So you've been in this post, well, you've been in higher ed now for much of your eons. Can you talk about how have the attitudes of and mindsets of students changed in that period?
Well, I mean, the most amazing thing that I see, we have 80,000 students on campus from all 50 states and 158 countries. And the most amazing thing to see now is the seriousness of the students. And so we have significant improvements in behavior, much less in terms of numbers of issues in conduct and behavior. We have unbelievable community service. We have tens of thousands of students working in community service. So the most important thing that I've seen in the rise of the kids coming in, born in 2005 and 2006, 2004, is how serious they are about the future, how much they want to contribute, how committed they are to each other, how open they are to the ideas of true equality. True democratic equality. I mean, it's unbelievable to see this, how they work together. We have thousands of Muslim students, thousands of Jewish students, thousands of Christian students, every belief system you can imagine, and they work to get along here in really fantastic ways. It's really, I've never seen anything like it in my whole life. And so it's very, very encouraging from my perspective.
What's your explanation for why the students have come to take their education so much more seriously?
I think that they are just more aware. I think they have more connection to what's going on. I think they're just more aware. They have access to everything. They have access to, we hear about all the problems, of which there are many, and we hear about all the stresses and the strains, of which there are innumerable examples, but we don't focus on the fact of how aware these kids are, what they can do, and how empowered they are. And so that's my explanation for why they are as they are now.
But this is not, and this is a question for, there's a sign which says transition to Q&A. It's very problems. That I don't see optimism elsewhere. And I'm worried is why, if there are these beacons of hope or these places of transformation like ASU, why don't I see that, hear that, or feel that in the culture? Why, if all you do is read about colleges, you would think that every college student was miserable and every system was failing.
And the question is, what are we doing here? I mean, I think the world is a very broken place right now. And I think, as I think about this generation of college students, they've been maybe absent the greatest generation of World War II. I think this generation of students has been shaped by the brokenness of this world in a very significant way. As I said, maybe more than any other generation, absent the greatest generation. Like you think about 18-year-olds today, they were born just after 9/11. The Great Recession hit in their early schooling years. In high school, the pandemic hit. Everything we're going through now, they're living in this incredibly charged, divided culture. And there's two ways. You can either bend cynical. You can say, this world is broken, it's screwed up, and it's never going to get better. Or you can say, this world is broken, and I'm going to do something to fix it. At Hope, we make a very clear distinction between optimism and hope, and we actually say that an optimist is actually kind of a lazy person, because an optimist is someone who just believes that the world is going to get better on its own. You don't have to do anything about it. Whereas a hopeful person is an action-oriented person. A hopeful person is someone who believes the world can get better, but we have a role to play in helping fix it. So, I mean, that's I think what works here. I don't know how to answer the broader societal question. As I said, I think that's one of the things that has troubled me the most over the last 4 years. It's not necessarily just the headline problems. It's a lack of hope when it comes to our headline problems.
Yeah.
I think there's a problem in journalism itself, and so I just think that people feed lots and lots of drivel. And they're not really, that it's easier to pick up on the problem or the exception than to look at the core transformation. I mean, I agree with, the notion of the difference between hope and optimism, and it is about hope. It's also the case that if you just look at the the accelerated arc of history's bending towards justice, using that famous phrase. I mean, we're on that right now. We've got a substantial improvement. If you look at where we're going in terms of unbelievable transformations that we're in the middle of and that lie ahead of us when we work out some of the complexities, we've got a great moment here to move forward. And I'm not being an optimist. I'm being hopeful, realizing the work that has to be done.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm under strict instructions from the powers that be to do some Q&A here. I have them on this little iPad. One of the questions is, Mr. Gladwell, what shoes are you wearing?
Nikes.
I can't see them. What are they?
Nikes. All right, that was easy. Mr. Gladwell, what would you like the higher education landscape to look like when your child is at an age to make a decision about their future? Well, this actually is a good question, and that bears on all of I would like her to have a million real choices. I'd like her, I would like her to be like walking down 8th Street. I want her to see everything. Like there shouldn't just be, I have a friend who went to St. John's College, the Great Books College, where you read about Aristotle for 4 years. There should be like a bunch of versions of St. John's. There should be a bunch. I would hope that there are 10 different versions of Hope Forward. I would hope that there's 10 large state universities in this country that are just basically copying everything you've done, Michael. Like, just take the playbook, photocopy it, and mail it to their, I want like 1,000 flowers blooming, and it shouldn't be that you're all trying to get into the same 5 copycat schools, which I think that's what I would like her to be liberated from, is the kind of tyranny of a million college students competing for 1,000 spaces. That just strikes me as no wonder everyone is so anxious when it comes time to applying to college. But all right, another question. Do you guys want to comment on that?
I agree, 100%.
I agree. It really is about diversity and different pathways and people showing more respect for different models. I mean, we have a general lack of respect. We think that everything's now driven based on whether or not you got a 1,600 on your SAT score when you were 17, and the kid next door to you who was having difficulty sleeping, got a 1,400. So therefore, that person is a lesser human. Okay, all from one test. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah. I always joke as a runner that it would be really cool if there was a small college that decided to only admit runners.
Yeah.
So think about this. Runners are introverted, disciplined. We don't party that much because why would we? We have to get up in the morning and go for a long run. We like to get lots of sleep. How ideal is this? An entire college of people who just aren't staying up all night drinking, are quiet, and go for 20-mile runs in the morning.
My first roommate when I was on the track team at Iowa State was a middle distance runner who locked the door at 8:30 and wouldn't let me in if I didn't get back.
And look what happened to you, Michael. Look what happened to you. All right, we're down to our last 3 minutes here. Let's see. Let's finish on a fun topic, which is, this is fun because it'll allow both of you to bash the so-called elite colleges. Question for both you and President Scogin. How do legacy scholarships feature in this revolutionary model of financing undergraduate education? So this question of legacies. What do we do about the fixation with legacies in elite higher ed?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be. So.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. So I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, we're trying to orient around access. Both Michael and I are trying to orient around access. And any kind of shenanigans or games you're playing around that, it's not real access. And I think there, as we've said, there needs to be a real movement around really solving for access.
I mean, I would point out that I mean, this is part of how crazy the conversation has become, but there will be a Supreme Court decision this summer about affirmative action, which was brought against the plaintiff in this, or the defendant in this case was the elite Harvard College, I guess it's Harvard and somebody else. And they, with a straight face, are making an argument that says that they ought to be left alone to do as they've been doing because they are valiantly holding up the cause of access to. First of all, they're tiny. Secondly, they had let in legacies like every 5 minutes. And 3, they have massive amounts of money which just sit in bank accounts and are never used. I mean, it's the most hypocritical. No wonder there is so much cynicism about higher education when the highest profile actors are behaving with such shamelessness.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's been a lot of focus on low-income students and giving low-income students access to a great education, and obviously that's important. I think another thing that's talked about less is the middle class, and what we're seeing in higher education is the middle class is increasingly getting squeezed out of higher education. The Brookings Institution defines the middle class as the middle 60%, so if you take out the top 20 and the bottom 20%, the middle 60% is how they define the middle class. And if you look at where kids are going to college, if they go to college from the middle class, the modal school, is that the right way to say it? Like mean, median, mode. So the most common type of institution is a community college. And the question is, community colleges are great. They serve an enormously important purpose in our society. But the question is, are they going to community colleges because they want to? Like they feel like that's the best education they want to get? Or is it because that's the only thing they can figure out how to afford? And I think it's probably the latter. And we've set up this system in the United States where there's like this great sorting of America that happens between high school and college. And it's like we line up all the 12th graders and we sort them. You go here, you go here, you go here. And where you get sorted in that project is incredibly determinative as to the trajectory of your life. And it ought to be the case that everyone has access to a great education.
Yeah. I am now under enormous institutional pressure to wrap up.
I mean, I don't know who's in charge here.
But I wanted to say thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us. You're a very busy person. And I wanted to say that I have, since we met years ago, I have been following what you do very closely, and I consider you one of the, if I had to make a list of the 10 most important Americans of the last 100 years, you'd be on the list.
Oh,
I mean that honestly. So,
that makes me nervous, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you. See you guys.
Yeah. Jennifer, back to you.
Malcolm is not kidding around. There's a screen that says, "Welcome Jennifer back," to wrap up, and it's like stressing me out watching it up there. So thank you, Malcolm, for that segue. I can't wait to sit down with my colleagues and talk about this conversation. I can't wait for the follow-up conversations that are sure to happen in the following days and weeks. So I want to encourage everybody, again, who's here on campus and online to continue engaging with the programming today. So check your program to see what other programs are on the horizon. And won't you please thank our guests today for an amazing conversation. Thanks to all of you. Hope to see you soon, and we are adjourned. Thank you.